Welcome to NTD News. I'm Paul Graney. Here are today's top stories. The Trump administration is moving to repeal a rule that denied funding to some faith-based adoption agencies. The repeal allows agencies to factor in the sexual orientation of parents-to-be. Elizabeth Warren reveals her plan to pay for Medicare-for-All. The plan would cost almost $52 trillion. Warren claims her tax hikes would not affect the middle class. The U.S. Treasury Secretary meets with India's finance minister. The two signed an agreement meant to offset the loss of oil from U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil. Runners prepare for the New York City Marathon. 50,000 runners from around the world are expected to participate. A former back-to-back champion talks about what keeps him running. And also running in the marathon this weekend, twin-sister Australian football players. They'll be running to raise money for a cause that affects one of them personally. The Department of Health and Human Services announced a rule change today. It will allow more faith-based foster and adoption care providers to get federal money. The department is removing a discrimination rule the Obama administration made on its way out of office.
The Obama administration added non-discrimination based on sexual orientation to the agency's regulations. The Trump administration is undoing that. While agencies will have to comply with other discrimination laws to get federal money, sexual orientation will not be one of them. This will mostly affect agencies that don't allow gay parents to foster or adopt. The Faith-Based Family Research Council hailed the move as a win for religious freedom. The council's president said in a statement that faith-based adoption providers will no longer have to choose between abandoning their faith or abandoning homeless children because the government disapproves of their views on marriage. Health and Human Services says all grantees will still have to comply with Supreme Court decisions and discrimination laws passed by Congress. It said these require the federal government not infringe on religious freedom in its operation of HHS grant programs. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
The October jobs report is out and investors are breathing a sigh of relief. That's because the numbers are better than expected. The Labor Department says U.S. employers added 128,000 jobs last month. However, the unemployment rate rose slightly to 3.6%. Meanwhile, 36,000 manufacturing jobs were lost last month, mostly because of the General Motors strike. But economists say now that the strike is over, jobs should bounce back this month. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite also both closed at record highs. The U.S. and India met today to ensure adequate global oil supplies after U.S. sanctions barred nations from buying Iranian crude. The two nations signed a joint statement to deepen the partnership between Washington and New Delhi.
Mnuchin reiterated that the U.S. sanctions on oil from Iran are aimed at a major security concern, not the Iranian people.
The issue around us being determined that there are not nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, exporting of terror.
He added that the U.S. has been working with its allies to make sure there is significant supply in the oil market to offset the sanction.
I just came from the Middle East and was in Saudi Arabia where I met with the energy minister and others, and I think they and others have done a very good job so that it doesn't have an economic impact. We are sensitive to the fact that India has tremendous energy needs.
Meanwhile, footage broadcast by news outlet Kurdistan 24 on Friday appeared to show armored U.S. vehicles being deployed to oil wells in northeast Syria. The U.S. military said last week it was reinforcing its position in Syria with additional assets. The mechanized forces will seek to prevent oil fields from being taken over by ISIS remnants or others.
Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren is claiming she'll pay for her Medicare-for-All plan without raising taxes on the middle class. However, her funding plan released today projects the cost at almost $52 trillion over the next decade.
Warren says her plan will give everyone the chance to have affordable health care by asking the richest 1% of Americans to pay for it.
It's all fully paid for by asking the top 1% and giant corporations to pay a fair share.
Warren reiterated that pledge on Twitter while asserting she can return $11 trillion to American families. The proposal insists that it can cover the cost with a combination of existing federal and state spending on health care, as well as taxes on employers, financial transactions, the ultra-wealthy, and large corporations. The plan also includes a payroll tax increase on employers, something economists say can hit workers by translating into reduced wages. Warren's campaign added that if they are at risk of falling short, they could impose a supplemental employer Medicare contribution for big companies with, quote, extremely high executive compensation and stock buyback rates, unquote. Additionally, the campaign claims they can scrounge up additional funds by reining in defense spending. But some of Warren's rivals for the 2020 nomination are not buying her claim. Joe Biden's deputy campaign manager, Kate Bedingfield, said, quote, the mathematical gymnastics in this plan are all geared towards hiding a simple truth. It's impossible to pay for Medicare-for-All without middle-class tax increases, unquote. 9 candidates so far have qualified for the next Democratic debate, which will be held on November 20th in Georgia.
A commissioner with the Federal Communications Commission says that the U.S. 5G spectrum strategy needs to be adjusted. Speaking at a Senate hearing yesterday, she warned that the current strategy would deepen the digital divide. She also warned about the security risks of using Chinese equipment.
FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel says the U.S. should move away from making high-band spectrum a priority. Despite higher speeds and bigger capacity, she said the high-band signal is easily blocked by walls. Their short transmission distance means they need a lot of antenna, making them more expensive and harder to deploy to rural areas. Using mid-band spectrum like other countries do can make 5G deployment faster, cheaper, and offer wider coverage.
And if we want rural America to see 5G, I think we have to focus on that sooner rather than later.
She also warned that Chinese telecom equipment is a major national security threat to the U.S. The FCC plans to vote next month to designate Chinese companies Huawei and ZTE as national security risks. This would bar U.S. rural carriers from tapping an $8.5 billion government fund to purchase their equipment or services. The FCC has also proposed making small rural carriers replace any Huawei or ZTE equipment. The regulator is also considering creating a program to offset the cost of replacing the equipment.
We're not talking about pulling all this stuff out tomorrow. There is a reasonable plan likely that would allow for transitioning out over the next 1.5 to 2 years.
During the hearing, panelists said the federal government has limited funds for removing such equipment. It will need to identify where the real risks are to prioritize the funding.
But I think that we can all agree that the goal is to take this equipment out of our networks and to make sure it is no longer there as we head to 5G.
For long-term U.S. telecom security, the FCC's approach seems to be that it's better to be safe than sorry. Reporting by Kitty Wong, NTD News.
Severe thunderstorms knocked over trees, down power lines, and damaged homes throughout the Northeast. The storms also brought unwelcome flooding to parts of the region starting on Halloween.
In New York, people had to be rescued from their homes due to flooding. Police using a boat to rescue people from a home in the village of Dolgeville. The Buffalo area also dealing with flash flooding after 4 to 5 inches of rain. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo declaring a state of emergency in 11 counties, deploying 200 National Guard. Meanwhile, the power outages affecting over 500,000 people in the Northeast. According to PowerOutage.us, as of this morning, 230,000 people without power in New York, 181,000 in Pennsylvania, 103,000 in Maine, and nearly 90,000 in Connecticut.
And coming up this weekend, the New York City Marathon, known as the largest marathon in the world. Over 50,000 runners are expected to participate in this year's event. NTD's Miguel Moreno met with a few of them to see how they're preparing for the race.
Flags from around the world mark the borders of this year's route. Runners are preparing for what's to come this weekend, like Aaliyah Gray from Colorado. She'll participate in Sunday's New York City Marathon.
I run about 100 miles a week when I'm in marathon training.
Gray ran the marathon 5 years ago.
I'm really excited to be back. It's just the energy out here is unreal, and it's obviously such a special city, and the entire town gets behind it.
Last year, over 52,000 participants finished the marathon, which goes throughout the city's 5 boroughs. And that number isn't isolated to New Yorkers. The nearly half-a-century-old spectacle attracts an international audience. Ariane Velez from the Philippines said she was looking for something special.
And I wanted something different, something like fulfilling, something more challenging. So that's why I chose New York City.
She's been preparing for months, 20 miles every 2 weeks. We managed to find a champion along the route, German Silva, a back-to-back winner in the 90s from Mexico. He said he no longer runs competitively, but it's a marathon he doesn't turn down.
Anytime is good for me because every year is completely different. It's a new experience.
The New York Police Department recently announced it would have bomb squads and other special units cover the race, but said this isn't a response to any specific threat. Since the U.S. killed the leader of ISIS last week, the NYPD has been monitoring terrorist groups. Silva said he trusts the police will do their job well.
Every second, every day that you move, no matter which country, there are risks. But if you think about it, you are not going to enjoy life.
So if you want to check out the marathon, it starts in Staten Island Sunday morning and finishes in Central Park. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Up next, the U.S. government is conducting a security review of the owner of the TikTok mobile app. Lawmakers believe the Beijing-based company could pose a threat to U.S. app users. More on the risks after the break.
This is extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have blocked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次举起黑旗和橙旗呢去發射了很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放催淚彈嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧就見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂咧，我就。
That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide. Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
Reuters reported today that the U.S. government has launched a national security review of the owner of video app TikTok. It's looking at owner Beijing ByteDance's $1 billion acquisition of the social media app Mnuchin.
While the $1 billion acquisition was completed 2 years ago, U.S. lawmakers have been calling in recent weeks for a national security probe into TikTok, concerned that the Chinese company may be censoring politically sensitive content and raising questions about how it stores personal data. TikTok has been growing more popular among U.S. teenagers. About 60% of TikTok's 26.5 million monthly active users in the U.S. are between the ages of 16 and 24. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which reviews deals by foreign acquirers for potential national security risks, has started to review the Mnuchin deal. Last week, U.S. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Tom Cotton wrote to the acting director of national intelligence asking for a national security probe. They were concerned about the video sharing platform's collection of user data and whether China censors content seen by U.S. users. TikTok has said U.S. user data is stored in the United States, but the senators noted that ByteDance is governed by Chinese laws. Senator Marco Rubio last month asked the committee to review ByteDance's acquisition of Musical.ly. He said any platform owned by a company in China, which collects massive amounts of data on Americans, is a potential serious threat to the country. Washington has been increasingly scrutinizing app developers over the safety of the personal data they handle, especially if some of it involves U.S. military or intelligence personnel.
And a blow to freedom of speech in Hong Kong. Yesterday, a court handed down a ruling allowing censorship of the internet. The order bans certain online messages starting November 15th.
A Hong Kong court has granted a temporary injunction to block messages inciting violence on messaging app Telegram and the Reddit-like forum LIHKG, two of the most popular communication channels in the city's protest movement. The move comes just as Hong Kong braces for another weekend of mass protests. It was immediately met with strong criticism. Hong Kong pro-democracy lawmaker Charles Mock said in a statement that the temporary injunction sets an extremely dangerous precedent for introducing internet censorship of online speech, similar to the Great Firewall of China. It is unknown how the Hong Kong authorities plan to ban Telegram. The app is registered in both the United States and the UK. On the same day, 3 U.S. senators introduced legislation that would impose sanctions on Chinese officials responsible for suppressing freedoms in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Be Water Act was jointly introduced by Republican Senators Josh Hawley of Missouri, Rick Scott of Florida, and John Cornyn of Texas. It would call for the use of the Global Magnitsky Act to sanction Chinese and Hong Kong officials involved in curbing Hong Kongers' freedoms of speech and assembly. Hawley explained that the term "be water" draws inspiration from the strategy Hong Kong protesters have adopted in the recent months of demonstrations to move quickly and be fluid when confronted by police. On Friday, China vowed to prevent foreign powers from interfering in Hong Kong's affairs. Beijing said it is preparing to take matters in its own hands, but gave no details of any specific policy steps it might take. The Chinese Communist regime has also quietly more than doubled its deployment of mainland security forces in Hong Kong in a dramatic move by Beijing to prepare for a potential worsening of the unrest.
Up next, Paris tries to cope with an abundance of discarded electric scooters by salvaging them. More on what the city is doing about the situation after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
Electric scooters have been a success in Paris, with thousands of them being installed over the summer. However, they've also created a problem, but one that some people have figured out how to make a profit from. NTD's David Vives has the story.
Along the Paris Seine docks, 100 yards from the Eiffel Tower, Yuva Hajali throws his fishing line into the Seine River. His target, a salvaged scooter thrown into the water.
If I keep on pulling, it should eventually come out of the water.
Scooter fisherman is a new Parisian profession that came with the proliferation of electric scooters. Guppy, a recycling business founded this year, performed its first large-scale operation on October 31st. More than 15 employees, including a diver, cooperated to clean the river of its debris.
When you dive, there's no visibility. There's a lot of traffic on the river and traps. I need to avoid not getting stuck, which makes it very dangerous to operate.
After much effort, the diver's team pulls out a heavy scooter, with passers-by applauding.
I think it's fantastic that they're revitalizing the river and cleaning their beautiful environment.
Among the objects pulled out of the river are a lot of scooters. Since this summer, shared electric scooters have exploded globally and helped transform urban mobility. But they have also sparked a backlash from people angry that their city streets are littered with carelessly parked or discarded scooters.
There are about 20,000 rental scooters provided by a dozen companies in Paris. The city's mayor, Anne Hidalgo, has described them as anarchic, and Transport Minister Elisabeth Borne said the city was experiencing the law of the jungle.
Calixe Duval-Arnaud and his team park recovered scooters here so that scooter companies can come to collect them. According to him, scooter companies are well aware of the situation.
We hope that the operators will be responsible and think of solutions to limit these issues. Some operators decided to found us because all this manpower has a cost. Sometimes we use divers, and in the future we would like to use public data to locate the debris.
Paris's mayor has decided to set a limit of 15,000 scooters from 3 operators that are now competing among themselves to win the mayor's call for tenders.
Google parent company Alphabet Inc. will buy wearable device maker Fitbit Inc. for $2.1 billion. The search giant is looking to enter the fast-growing market for fitness trackers and smartwatches.
Fitbit is a pioneer in wearable technology, but it's lost prominence due to competition. When rumors of a potential buyout by Google surfaced earlier this week, Fitbit shares soared almost 30%. Alphabet said it will pay $7.35 per share for the company. While Google has joined the other major technology companies, such as Apple and Samsung, in developing smartphones, it has yet to develop any wearable offerings. Fitbit has 28 million active users worldwide and has sold more than 100 million devices. The deal is expected to close next year, if approved by regulators and Fitbit shareholders.
Teens are spending even more time on electronic devices, and that doesn't include time spent looking at screens for school. It's a trend that's been increasing for the past 4 years.
More than 7 hours a day. That, on average, is how much time a U.S. teen spends watching a screen for entertainment, according to a new study by the nonprofit organization Common Sense Media. Researchers say screen time has inched up by 42 minutes a day since 2015. Data from a nationwide survey of more than 1,600 youth between the ages of 8 to 18 was analyzed. The study says tweens spend nearly 5 hours looking at screens. Most of the time in both age groups is spent looking at TV or videos. The research shows for tweens, YouTube dominates the online video space. Youth also spend a majority of time using devices to play games. Risks include the potential for youth to be exposed to harmful messages online and for them to become socially isolated, spending time on devices instead of with peers.
Up next, twin sister Australian football players are in New York to run the marathon this weekend. They'll be running to raise money for a cause that affects one of them very personally. More on their journey when we return.
The lasting beauty of traditional oil painting, realistic style, brilliant, moving, expressive. 2019 NTD Television International Competition for Figure Painting in Oil, guided by truthfulness, kindness, and beauty. We invite you to join us on our journey back to traditional art. gold prize award of $10,000. For more detail, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
These identical twins from Australia live together and achieve their identical dream together. They'll also run together in the upcoming NYC Marathon. NTD's Sherwin Rong has their story.
People say twins have a special bond, especially these two. They are more than identical.
We both love sport and are mad about sport, so when one of us does one thing, the other wants to naturally do it as well. So it was almost a little bit of healthy competition, I think.
Sarah and Jess Hoskin have both been playing professionally in the Australian Football League for 4 years.
We're lucky in the fact that we are able to play sport together.
Not just in the same sport, but also the same team.
We enjoy playing with each other. I mean, sometimes it gets a little bit much, the fact we live together too.
But there is one difference between them.
I'm very messy.
Very.
And I don't like cleaning. Mind you, you don't either.
I'm a little bit better than you.
Growing up, they always did everything together. Since they both love sports, they knew they wanted to be professional athletes.
So many people just say, oh, it's like one of you throw the ball over your shoulder and you just know the other one's there, sort of thing.
And it came true, but not without its challenges. Since young, Jess was born with a cleft lip and had to go through several surgeries, but having Sarah there motivated her to achieve success.
But knowing that I had to get to her level, so it was a good indicator for me, and I was able to push myself.
Now the sisters work with different charities and use the sport as a platform to help others in need. That's how they took up the challenge to run the New York City Marathon for a charity called Interplast, which helps perform reconstructive surgeries.
I've never run a marathon before. I've never competitively run before, other than football or netball or other sports.
Although it will be challenging for them, but one thing they're sure of is that they will make it to the finish line, no matter what. Sherwin Rong, NTD News, New York.
And speaking of twins, it was Meet Your Twin Day at the Berlin Zoo. Two panda babies met for the first time since they were born.
Now 2 months old, the twin panda cubs are enjoying cuddling time together while their mother Momo was chewing away on some bamboo. The cubs weigh around 7 pounds and have started their first attempts at crawling. The first family trip with their mother to explore the outside of their enclosure is scheduled for the beginning of next year, when the twins are more mobile and can follow their mother independently. The cubs were born on August 31st and will be named by the end of the year.
And that's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney.